morning, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Sue Padgett, and this is SGN, Some Generosity News.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Sue Padgett, and this is SGN, Some Generosity News. Because when the world seems to be living out the book of Revelation, we need a news source dedicated to sharing stories of generosity and to the goodness that it is to be human. So today, we widen our nets, looking for generosity beyond the walls of FCC Jeffersonville. And now for some generosity news. The people of FCC Jeffersonville just can't keep this generosity thing to themselves. Social distance is not a practice here at FCC, even if we are 6 feet apart. Here at FCC, we prefer the terms social justice, solidarity, and mutual support. Endeavoring to be the hands and feet of Jesus in a physically distant world, the World and Community Outreach Committee, after decades of taking school kids shopping for clothes in the fall, overhauled the system.
This year, the World and Community Outreach team decided that our Clothe a Child process would have to look a little different than usual. Usually we shop with elementary age children from our area at Burlington Coat Factory, and we spend about $70 per child helping them get new clothes for school. Well, that couldn't happen this year, so instead we mailed gift cards to Meijer for $70 so families could get those necessary back to school items. This process of trust on our part, trusting these families would get what they need, not only empowered us to change our thinking in a time when generosity has to look a little different, but hopefully also empowered these families to be able to use the funds in the ways that they saw best. So trusting families with our God-given generosity is sort of like us trusting God. In these moments when we really don't have the control of what's happening, we just have to trust that they would use those resources and our generosity in the right ways, just like we have to trust that God will use our generosity and resources in the right ways. So families were thrilled that they had a little bit of extra cash, and we could feel that we were still spreading generosity even in these interesting times. So trusting families like that is just kind of like how we have to trust God.
Families were thrilled with a little extra cash for school necessities, and our World and Community Outreach Committee was thrilled to be on yet another Zoom meeting. This sharing of generosity outside our walls reminds me of 2018. Remember that? Before COVID, murder hornets, and riots? Don't you yearn for the problems of 2018? Well, one problem of 2018 was that school-age kids at Riverside Elementary were suffering unnecessarily because of in arrears lunch accounts.
So a few years back, I was meeting with Riverside Elementary, and this was at a time when our church was getting the clothes closet off the ground. And so I wanted to talk to them and just see what needs they had as a school. And I thought, what better way than for us to support our community school that's closest to our church. And in meeting with them, they had showed me their food pantry. They try to provide food to kids when they come. They're hungry in the morning. They need breakfast. And if kids are in a negative lunch balance, then they need some additional food support, because you don't get a big enough lunch. You don't get a full lunch if your food balance is negative. And so, and so they wanted to make sure everybody had enough to eat, because that affects their learning, it affects their behavior, as it would any of us. And in the midst of talking with this person, I mean, they are just in tears about what's going on with families, and tell me how some of these families will never be able to dig out of their situation. And I think all of us would agree that no kid should go hungry, and how can we support that? And so I asked the church on the next Sunday, hey, here's the situation. I mean, they're about $1,000 in the hole. We could pay off their entire lunch balances. And what happened? You all stepped up and paid off those lunch balances. I mean, it took like less than a week to get the money to do that. And not only did we pay off those lunch balances, but we gave them funding for the next year that they didn't have to worry about kids being hungry. The second part to that is, there was no news. We weren't written about in the paper. We didn't post about it. It was done quietly. It was just done privately. And I think that's very important. I remember a youth member once told me, we don't have to show off everything we do. And I thought, what a great thing we did, without seeking praise back, without seeking thanks back. We just did something really good, something that we know that is important and needed to happen, and we did it to love our neighbor. So probably one of the proudest moments I've been a part of at our church.
Nothing says sharing generosity like rectangular pizzas. And then there are the problems of 2020. We cannot ignore the fact that having no and limited in-person services has impacted churches across the world financially, and FCC is no exception. Paying our staff and keeping the bills paid, while not an exciting way to spend money, is necessary for what we all expect from our church. While our giving is held steady thanks to some outrageously generous givers, it is good to be reminded that your giving matters, and there are many ways to contribute, including online through the website, electronic deductions, and our drop box in the building. Don't forget to support your church, so it is there to support you. And finally, speaking of generosity outside our walls, we have the privilege of speaking with Indiana Disciples' own regional minister, Reverend Rick Spleth, today. Good morning, Reverend. Welcome to SGN, and thanks for being with us. We've been talking about generosity. It is stewardship season after all. And I was just curious, where or from whom did you learn to share generosity?
His name was Ed Simonis. He stood way tall. I suspect that he was over 6.5 feet tall, maybe pushing 7. Ed was an elder in my home church, First Christian Church, Tulsa, Oklahoma. When he talked, I listened, and I can still hear him to this day talking about giving. He talked about how meaningful it was for him to give, what joy and satisfaction it brought him, and that he would rather use his money for that than any other thing. I was just a child, but I was impressed. I assumed, and I think correctly, that Ed had a lot of money. He was a successful businessman with multiple companies supplying lighting and building materials to contractors. He handled a lot of funds, but he said that the thing that brought him the most joy of all was to give his money away. Wow, that stuck with me. I believed him. Partly, I think, because he was the tallest person I knew, his presence was commanding, but mostly because I could tell he was sincere. He was telling the truth. I never did grow up to be as tall as Ed, but I have confirmed in my own life the joy he described. Giving is a blessing. It makes you grow from the inside out. Maybe if I gave away more, I could end up as tall as Ed Simonis. I don't know if that would work, but it would be worth a try.
And so how has sharing generosity been a blessing to you?
To tell you the truth, giving can give me the giggles. The other day, a friend of mine had some surgery, so my wife Diane and I decided that we would send her and her family a meal. In pre-COVID times, we would have prepared that meal and taken it to them, but given the pandemic, we ordered it from a restaurant through the delivery service DoorDash. That was really fun. I got a text message from that company when they got the order, when they picked up the order, and they even sent me a photo when they left it on her step. It was such a delight to think about them enjoying that food. It made me happy all night long. I get that same satisfaction when I make my offering. When the offering plate comes to me, I don't just slide my gift in. I like to put it in with power. Bam! Because I know that it is going to do so many good things. It is going to support the church that I love, my local congregation, and my extended church across Indiana and around the world. I can see the faces of staff members it supports, and people in need it touches, and institutions it sustains, and all the ways it encourages and brings hope. And once that offering plate leaves my hand, or I hit send on my computer, I watch it as it goes all the way down the row, or all the way through cyberspace. And sometimes That can give me a giggle to see it on its way.
And so, what are some ways that you have seen FCC Jeffersonville share with the region of Indiana?
Did you know that out of all disciples' congregations in Indiana, First Christian Church in Jeffersonville is in the top 10 in Disciples Mission Fund giving and in the top 10 in DMF giving per person? That is outstanding. It is not easy to be on both of those lists. A small congregation can make the per capita group by giving a lot per person. Or a large congregation could make the total giving list by the size of their contribution. But to make both lists is amazing. And your church has done that year after year. Thank you. My guess is that it is built into your DNA. It is who you are. The evidence for this is in the people you produce. Lloyd Tatlock, for one, who grew up in your congregation and served as a missionary for our church in Paraguay, Argentina, and Mexico. But you have many more missionaries like Kelly Allen, Danny and Kendra Needham, Billy Fulton, Maggie Harris, and Chad Bosiker, whose mission field is the Bedford campgrounds. Like Lloyd Tatlock before them, they too are spreading the gospel and changing lives. First Christian Church Jeffersonville is impacting the world through its people and its generous giving year after year. No wonder readers of your city newspaper have voted you the best church in town. As far as I'm concerned, it would be hard to find any better. Blessings on you.
And where can we see the fruit of sharing with the region?
Do you know what happens to your Disciples Mission Fund dollars after they leave your church? I have seen where it goes with my own eyes, and it is pretty amazing. Some of it provides lunches in an elementary school in Haiti. Some of it provides hygiene supplies to Syrian refugees in the desert of Jordan. Some of it provides agricultural education to rice farmers in Bangladesh battling climate change. Some of it provides support for battered women in a mountain village in Colombia. I have been to all those places, and the people I met there told me to tell you thank you. They know you are their donor. Some other people told me to tell you thank you too. Amy Vanderford, who is a new church pastor in the Fountain Square area in Indianapolis, and Presley Inser, a little girl from New Albany who thinks the Bedford camp is better than Disney World, and she has been to both. And John Ray, a recent CTS graduate we will soon ordain, who you have helped nurture with your giving. And Dwayne Montgomery, a search committee chair who calls me every week, and you provide the way for me to be available to him. Your giving every week touches countless lives every week. It is without a doubt one of the best investments you can make. Thank you for your generosity.
That's all for week 2. This is SGN, Some Generosity News. I'm Sue Padgett, and we'll see you next week.
Identity theft is not a joke, Cass.